everyone is familiar with the sleeping giant concept. I would rather introduce the notion of the poisoned giant into the American vernacular, where we are just as powerful as we were back in World War II. But because of how brainwashed we've become, how absolutely diluted our diet has become, our lack of sunlight, our lack of a common sense within, the classroom, but then also just everything that's on the television. The air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we consume is absolutely poisoned. The medication that we've been given, the vaccines that we've been given, that are all designed to destroy us. And someone can hear all that and say, like, well, then what's the point of giving up? But then the counter offer to that would be, because that's when God can show off against all of those odds. That's when God can really show off. And then that's when salvation really becomes abundantly apparent. That's our only way out of this mess. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, my dear friend Malcolm Guite, Dr. Malcolm Guite, he's a incredible poet, hopefully poet laureate of the UK one day, and he was a Don at Cambridge. He's a priest, an Anglican priest, and he said to me this last summer, because we're both C.S. Lewis scholars, and he's,
Mere
brilliant.
Christianity should be required reading for everyone
Required
in
reading.
America.
Completely agree. Absolutely should be required reading. But I was having a really bad year this last year and was at this conference in Belfast, Ireland with the C.S. Lewis Foundation, which listeners, if you should do anything, it is go to one of the C.S. Lewis Foundation's retreats, support them. They are doing the Lord's work, spreading C.S. Lewis everywhere. But what he said really stuck with me. And because I was talking about like the consolation of philosophy by Boethius and dealing with, the idea of evil winning and like what is it when an evil man wins, and how Boethius kind of comes to the conclusion that he was a Christian in Roman times at the end of the Roman Empire under the last Osgoth emperor, and was really dealing with, he was wrongly convicted. He was framed by the Senate, who had been
There's a
completely,
trend
there's
here.
a trend, a trend. And he was wrongly imprisoned and sentenced to death after being raised in, the Roman aristocracy and serving his country and his empire faithfully for over 25 years. Not only that, but raising two sons, which also did that, which were very high up and had, really great titles, and just a virtuous man is what he was. He draws on some stoicism, but he was really a Christian, like a profoundly devout Christian. And in his writings at the end, he's sentenced to death. He's on an island and he knows he's going to die. And this is the last thing he ever wrote. And it's like, well, evil can never actually harm you, because when you are no longer living in the definition of what you were created to be, you become nothingness. So evil men cease to become or be men at all, because men are created in the image of God. And as that, we have certain natural, we fit in the order in a certain natural way that we were created to. And when we walk away from that, we become twisted creatures that are not really men. And so back to Malcolm Guite, this is kind
Interesting.
of, we were talking about this, about, losing your fundamental purpose that you were divinely created for, and when you step out of the created order of things, and dealing with evil, and dealing with in the last battle, the last book of the Chronicles of Narnia, we were talking about how that really, and you and I are both Christian, and we both talk about how it feels more and more like end times every day. And
Yeah.
you really kind of feel sometimes the walls closing in, and feeling closer and closer. And you look at all kind of the prophetic things, you're like, well, that happens. So what's next? What's the point, right? You have that question in the back of your mind. It's like, well, if you know that the bad guys are gonna win, like they did in the last battle in the Chronicles of Narnia, and you know that you see the Pevensie family, Lucy and Susan. I mean, Susan not really, but like you have Peter and the younger kids, and they're fighting the Calormenes, and they end up all dying at the end, and leaving Narnia and being the real Narnia, being in heaven. And sorry for those of you that never finished Conquest and
Yeah,
Narnia.
huge spoiler
Spoiler,
alert right there.
spoiler, whatever. Yeah, everyone dies at the end of the Chronicles of Narnia, which no one I think really realizes that the whole family dies. But Malcolm Guite said in this conversation we were having, he said, it doesn't matter that the right side wins. It doesn't. It doesn't matter that the right side wins. It matters that the right side's right. And that is what we need to remember in this war that we are fighting every day. And that's what I feel like you really held on to, and came out of this with, is this Yeah, it can be discouraging looking up at, the mountain at maybe the impossible odds, but that's when heroes are made. I'm sure David felt that way when he was looking at Goliath. I'm sure
100%.
that, I'm sure that there have been and will continue to be countless men and women in history that God has placed at a specific time and place that seems like impossible odds. But our life, where we are right now, who you and I are as American citizens alone, that was based and built on impossible odds.
Yeah.
With God, all things are possible. Even the most impossible, the most absurd is possible with God. And I think that's something that you have like so eloquently and, intentionally communicated. And I just really want to say thank you for that.